Hello, everybody. Welcome to Amar's Game Chat. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I am Amar, and in case you did not know, Nintendo has announced that they will be hosting a Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase tomorrow, July 31st at 6 a.m. PT, 9 a.m. ET, and it will be approximately 25 minutes long, featuring information on upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch games from their publishing partners. So I am very, very excited for this. I wanted to make this video just to talk about, some of the things I think we will see in the partner showcase tomorrow. There's a lot of possibilities. Back when they started partner showcases in 2020, I think a lot of people were confused on like what they could show off in here. And then as the partner showcases have gone on, we've gotten a better idea of some of the games. Can first party games show up here? Stuff like that. So I'm very excited to talk about this partner showcase. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So yeah, partner showcase time. We have a partner showcase tomorrow. I will be doing a reaction to it once it begins. So, around obviously 9 a.m. ET, I will record my reaction to it. But there's a lot I want to talk about here because while obviously this isn't really, I know a lot of people were expecting a general direct this week. This isn't the general direct we were expecting. I think there is still a lot that they can show off. We have some third-party games from Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Direct earlier this year, like the one that was focused on Nintendo Switch games in March, as well as the Nintendo Switch 2 Nintendo Direct that aired on April 2nd. So we have a bunch of games from then that we just haven't really had much information on since those games were announced and released, or since they were announced, not released, but we just haven't really gotten much information on those games since then. As well as, there is a possibility that a first party game could show up here. So I just want to actually start with that because I think that's obviously, that's like probably the least I'll be talking about here, just because obviously I don't think we should be expecting to see, many first party games here, if any, but we do have a couple of games that are on the release slate now that are that are published by Nintendo, so they're first party games, but they are developed by studios outside of Nintendo, including Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Kirby's Air Riders, not Kirby's Air Riders, and the Duskbloods from Software. So we have 3 games there. I'm honestly only expecting to see one of those, and that is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, just because we do already have precedents that Hyrule Warriors can show up in partner showcases based on I believe it was the September 2020 partner showcase, as well as like the June 2022 partner showcase when Fire Emblem Warriors showed up in Nintendo Direct, partner showcase in June. So I think honestly we can expect to see that here. The one thing that from a first party perspective that we don't really have yet is a great idea about what the next couple months of the year looks like, leading into 2026. We only have one new game on the release slate, being Pokemon Legends EA, that has like a release date. And then we have a couple of games that are undated, so that's Metroid Prime 4, Kirby Air Riders, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. I believe that is it. But so that I think looking at this direct and and knowing that Hyrule Warriors and Warriors games have shown up in the directs before, I think this would be a great time to add another game to the release slate, even if it's releasing in November or December based on this winter time frame that we were given. But yeah, I think we could probably get a very good look at Hyrule Warriors here. I'm not sure it'll be the main focus of the direct. It could be the opener or the closer, but I think we will get a pretty good glimpse at it. I think the one thing with Hyrule Warriors is we don't really need to see too much of it, after we get like a larger trailer, just because we pretty much know the idea of Hyrule Warriors. It is a hack and slash. You are defeating a bunch of enemies all at once. And we don't really need to see too much of the story, just because I'm assuming this game will be very story heavy, because it is Hyrule Warriors game. It is building off the imprisoning war from The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So there's obviously a lot that I think could be spoiled in a trailer if they started going too much into the story. So, but again, I think Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment has a good chance of showing up here. Obviously, Kirby Air Riders can show up here, but I am a little more hesitant to say that just because the post that Nintendo made is specifying publishing partners. Normally, when there is a game that Nintendo will be publishing, worldwide or like on a very grand scale, it would have also said development partners. So it's possible Kirby Air Riders could show up here because it is being developed by Sora and Bandai Namco. I believe Bandai Namco is confirmed, but I think the general idea or the general speculation is that Bandai Namco is developing the game. So it is possible, because it's not being developed by Nintendo, but I don't really see Hyrule Warriors showing up here. I think that could get its own Sakurai Presents, later in August or September, or just, if we do get a general direct at some point this year, that's where it can also show up. And then the Dusk Bloods is another, I think 50-50 for me because it is, again, a development partner game, so but I also don't know if Nintendo is publishing that game worldwide because I believe with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, the reason why, it's usually able to appear in this direct, following the criteria Nintendo states, is that it is, I believe, normally published by Koei Tecmo in Japan. So, from that idea, it is a publishing partnered game, but I guess it really depends on if Bandai and From Software are publishing Dusk Blood somewhere else, somewhere else outside of like the US or Europe, because I believe Nintendo is publishing the game there, or like in these areas. But yeah, so the one I'm most confident about is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, but I wouldn't be surprised if, we saw maybe a little bit of Kirby Air Riders with maybe the announcement of a Sakurai Presents later in August or September, or something like, the Dusk Blood showing up. But besides that, I don't honestly expect any first party announcements here, from external studio, just because, and obviously there could be a first party game announced here. It isn't out of the realm of possibility since we did also get Endless Ocean Luminous announced last year during a partner showcase, but I do think Nintendo is probably gonna, focus only on third party published and developed games. And I think, it would be cool if there's a surprise that, a first party game is announced here, but I'm not going to put too much into that right now. Maybe a new Mario and Rabbids, or, maybe they gave a license out, like a smaller license out to an external, like an indie studio, and an indie studio is making a game implementing their IP or something like that. But besides that, I'm not expecting too much, I'm not expecting, the next game possible would have been like the Fire Emblem game, but I think that is something that they save for a general Nintendo Direct either at some point this year or early next year. But that is all I really have on the first party stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about the third party stuff just because, again, there is a lot that they could show off here. So let's get right into that. So, third party stuff. I'm trying my best to remember everything that they have announced from like the, past Nintendo Directs that are 30 party wise, but the first things that come to mind are, I think, Elden Ring, the Tarnished Edition. We saw that in the Nintendo Direct earlier this year for the Nintendo Switch 2, and it has not received a release date since then, so I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if we see it here and it gets a release date. We get a much better idea about, maybe some of the upgrades, what is exactly the Tarnished Edition for Elden Ring, stuff like that. So yeah, if I had to guess, I think that's probably releasing in maybe October. I think that could be a good 1-2 punch with Pokemon. Pokemon's like in the middle of October, so they could have Elden Ring maybe at the beginning or at the end of October. I think that'd be pretty fun. And then we also have games like Final Fantasy Remake. We don't have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth announced yet, so I think in like a release date announcement for Final Fantasy Remake, maybe for September, since that game, it is a lot older than, something like Elden Ring by like around 2 years. So there is, they could announce the date here, maybe show it off a little bit more, and then say, coming out at the end of September. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw Final Fantasy VII Rebirth get an official announcement here for the Nintendo Switch 2. I think based on the development interviews that we saw, they weren't asked the developers, they were creator voices. Based on the creator voices we saw, which included Final Fantasy VII Remake, I do believe they alluded to the fact that they want to try to get the whole trilogy, once the third part releases on to the Nintendo Switch 2. So at least I think we will be seeing Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and then obviously when we get to the third part, we will see a little bit more about that, hopefully. But yes, I think we see Final Fantasy VII Remake here. I think that is much more of a guarantee than maybe 7 Rebirth being announced, but I think a good, 1-2 punch here would be 7 Remake release date, and then 7 Rebirth maybe dated with a 2026 date. Something like, what they did with Dragon Quest 3 Remake last year and Dragon Quest 1+2 HD 2D Remake, which is another game that could show up here. We haven't seen too much of it yet. I believe it is releasing in November, like the Dragon Quest 3 Remake. And yeah, it did open the March 2025 Nintendo Direct, so they obviously do have, a good relationship with Square Enix, and they obviously do see this as a big game for them. So I wouldn't be surprised, if they do give this maybe not like the biggest push, just because obviously I think they have a couple of other games that will be new announcements for the Nintendo Switch 2 here that, might be bigger for them, just to state that we got these games on the Nintendo Switch 2. But I think maybe it showing up on the sizzle reel, or maybe a small little glimpse of it here could definitely work. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, Dragon Quest, 1+2 HD 2D. But speaking of Dragon Quest, something that I was thinking about when, I was thinking about predictions for a Direct this week is Dragon Quest 12. I was thinking, in the sense of the general Nintendo Direct, I was thinking maybe if there was any third-party game that could open a general Nintendo Direct for this month, I did think it would be Dragon Quest 12. But, even with a partner showcase, I wouldn't honestly be surprised if that is the big announcement that Nintendo has here. This is not really going off anything. I don't know how far Dragon Quest 12 is into development now. Obviously, we could be still 3 or 4 years away from it releasing, but I think that would be a pretty cool get for Nintendo. We have maybe Dragon Quest, maybe a small trailer for Dragon Quest 1+2 HD 2D. And then it leads into the closer being in Dragon Quest 12. Not a huge trailer for it, maybe just a re-reveal of sorts, but I think that'd be kind of cool. I'm not putting too much into that prediction necessarily, but still, I think a Dragon Quest 12 remake would be pretty fun. Not remake, Dragon Quest 12 announcement, re-reveal, something like that would be pretty fun here. And then obviously Dragon Quest 1+2 HD 2D being also here. I think that'd be pretty good. The other announcements, I won't go too much into them just because we don't really know a lot about them, but we do have a couple of the 2K games. We did have a rumor a little while ago that something like Red Dead Redemption 2 could be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, and they've been preparing an update for all the consoles that have the game. And then obviously they could release a remastered or a I'm not sure it'd be a remastered version, but a fully realized version of Red Dead Redemption 2 on Nintendo Switch 2, like they did with Red Dead Redemption. I don't believe last year, but the year before that. It could have been last year, honestly. The time goes by really fast these days. But, Red Dead Redemption 2 has been something that has been rumored for a while now, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that shows up there in this Direct. But, we have games like Borderlands 4 that could show up here. We did get a creator's voice for that earlier this year, so I wouldn't be surprised if Borderlands 4 shows up to a certain extent. Not something huge. We did get a release date for it, so on that the Borderlands account just tweeted a couple of or posted, because I believe it was also on Blue Sky and maybe other social media platforms, but definitely on Twitter and Blue Sky. But um, we did get that announcement a little while ago, so maybe it's not here just because I think that would be like the next big thing that they would talk about, and then maybe because I believe it's coming out in October, so like a look at it next month at maybe Gamescom would be like, more appropriate in that case. But we have games like that. We have the level 5 games that could show up here. We have Deca Police, we have Professor Layton in the World of Steam, we have Enzumia 11, which was just delayed, I believe, to November. So that's not one I don't think that's one we'll see here, just because I think if they were delaying, I think they would have saved that announcement for a direct like this. But if like they were in the direct, they would have saved the announcement for that delay for this direct. But I think something like Professor Layton could show up here, and I would honestly be very happy if it did. I'm anticipating that game a lot, just because I am a newer Professor Layton fan. I only got into it with the later 3DS games. I believe it was like the 3DS game that probably released in 2013, 14. I can actually pull up the name of that, so let me do that just so I can get that correct. So it's Professor Layton and the Miracle Mask. And the reason why I remember this game a lot is just because it did have the thing where like every day for like a year they released a new puzzle. I wasn't able to do all the puzzles, but I believe, and I think they're probably still available. Um, you know, I think it's like an update for the game, so like we'll have to see. I mean, I don't know if I would revisit the game, but I did like it a lot, so I'm excited for the World of Steam. And I'm hoping, it's still releasing this year. I believe it has a 2025 release date, but obviously with Level 5 delaying Azuma 11, I wouldn't be surprised if Professor Layton and the World of Steam got delayed. Let me make sure it has. Yeah, it still has a 2025 date, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if it did get pushed, to 2026. But this would be a pretty good place to announce that, just because we haven't seen much of Professor Layton in the World of Steam, and because it is, as of right now, a Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. So I think that would be a pretty cool thing just to bring up here, as a game that I think a lot of people are still very excited for, even though it has been delayed a couple times. Maybe not delayed, but I think they announced it a little earlier than maybe they should have in the February 2023 Nintendo Direct. But we have other games. We have Hollow Knight Silksong that they could announce here for not necessarily like a shadow drop or anything, because I believe the thing with Hollow Knight Silksong is that the backers of the game, I believe they get early access to it, so they can't do a shadow drop just because of that fact. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we get a release date here, and then maybe for the backer, maybe it's like a September release, maybe October release, and then maybe the backers get like the game in August or early September or something like that. But I think it'd be fun. I'm not putting too much too much, I guess, like in theory, like too much chips into that basket that we would see from Hollow Knight Silksong here, just because I think it is at the Xbox Gamescom event. There will be a playable demo there for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't be like disappointed if it didn't show up here. But we'll just have to see. I'm not gonna put too much into that for now. And then that is honestly, I think that's like those are the third party games that come to mind instantly when I think about what third party games are remaining for the Switch. And the Switch 2, we did get the retweet from the Just Dance Twitter account, so I'm assuming Just Dance will show up in this Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. But besides that, there's obviously a lot of first party games that generally could just show. I mean, not first party third party games that could generally just show up here. I would love a My Sims, like another My Sims collection. Maybe with like My Sims. Honestly, I was thinking about it. I think there is 2 more My Sims collections, at some point, as long as the My Sims cozy bundle did sell well. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see, maybe like an Agents edition, like bundle, or like a like a spy bundle or something like that, where we get My Sims Agents and My Sims Sky Heroes, and then like a party bundle or like a family bundle or something like that, where we get My Sims Party and My Sims Racing. So I think it'd be kind of cool. It will be a year in just a couple of months since the My Sims Cozy Bundle released. So this would be a great time for them to announce, another bundle if they are doing another one. But yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool. That's something I would be personally pushing for. But, it's for when it comes to like partner showcases and third party presence in Nintendo Directs in general, it is harder for me to predict those things just because there is such a wide swath of different games that could show up here. We could see a couple of Xbox ports show up here, for example. We could see something like, maybe some of the sports games show up here. We could see, maybe a new Monster Hunter game here, like Monster Hunter Rise 2 announced here. Though I think they are probably focused on Monster Hunter Worlds or Monster Hunter Wilds and Resident Evil 9 for now. But we could see like Resident Evil 7 and 8 get maybe. I'm still, I don't know how Nintendo's approaching the game key cards like situation in terms of like what games, like if they're like expanding the availability of cards, because I think the biggest thing with key cards is that and the reason why so many developers are choosing it is because the only card size that's currently available outside of game key cards is 64 gigabytes. I believe that was the rumor a little while ago. So if that is true, maybe Nintendo has started to now introduce like 32 gigabyte cards, and that's where we can get like collections like Resident Evil 7, maybe like the newer Resident Evil games on like an actual card. But besides that, I still would think that Resident Evil 7 and 8 could show up here. Maybe like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 and 4 remake, something like that. We could have a whole Resident Evil section here, like the June 2022 partner showcase had for Persona. Which, speaking of Persona, we could see Persona 3 Reloaded or Metaphor ReFantasio here as well. So yeah, we have a lot of things that obviously they could announce here. A lot of developers that I'm sure have been waiting to announce their games. I have Rune Factory Guardians Azuma released for the Switch 2 at launch. We could see Rune Factory, I believe 6 announced. That'd be kind of cool. Sonic Cross Worlds, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds could show up here. But that is, I'm just saying things now. I do want to finish off this video now talking about what I think will be the big announcements here. In theory, I don't really remember the last. I don't know if partner showcases have openers, so I won't predict a opener for this partner showcase. But I will predict a middle and a closer, and I do think, speaking of the Resident Evil things, I think Resident Evil will show up here, and it will be the middle section. I think that'd be a pretty cool middle section. Resident Evil, you confirm maybe not all the more recent Resident Evil games like 7, 8 remake of 2, 3, and 4, but maybe you confirm like 7 and remake Resident Evil 2 remake are coming to the Nintendo Switch this year. Maybe then you give like maybe a little bit of a roadmap. Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 3 remake, maybe Resident Evil 4 remake are coming next year, something like that. But I think that'd be a pretty cool middle section. A pretty big, some pretty big announcements for the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch. Well, those will be, I'm presuming, Nintendo Switch 2 exclusives. But for like the closer, it is kind of hard to predict because Yakuza closed the Nintendo Switch partner showcase from last August, and a first party announcement closed the February partner showcase last year, being Endless Ocean Luminous. So it is kind of, again, hard to predict what this could be. I don't think a lot of people were expecting to see Yakuza close the Nintendo Switch, like beyond Nintendo Switch in general, but also close a direct. And I don't think Yakuza will be the closer this time, just because we did also just get Yakuza 0 on Nintendo Switch 2. not too long ago. So, now that all the Yakuza games are coming to Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch, I don't think it would be like that huge of a surprise anymore. Like the Endless Ocean, the next Endless Ocean game would have been, or Yakuza coming back to Nintendo platforms. But I'm conflicted between two things. I think Hyrule Warriors could close this direct, especially depending on if it's getting a release date here, because I think that could be Nintendo's November game, and at that point we pretty much have Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star Across the Worlds coming out in August. We don't have anything for September yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a direct in September that's a general Nintendo Direct and they shadow drop something, or they do the direct early enough in the month that they can then just release a game at the end of the month. We have Pokemon in October, and then we have something like Hyrule Warriors, maybe Kirby Air Riders between November and December. And then Metro Prime 4 also fits in somewhere there, but that is, I'm kind of flipped between if it's Hyrule Warriors or something like, a big surprise announcement here that I don't think we would honestly be able to predict. The next Sonic 3D open area game, or maybe like a new Pac-Man game. Not like Shadow Labyrinth, but like a new like open world or 3D Pac-Man game would be pretty fun. I don't think My Sims would be a closer, but I think it's either Hyrule Warriors or a big surprise that shows up in this presents as a closer. Again, I don't want to predict anything like that's like, because I honestly I don't have a huge prediction that could be the closer outside of like Dragon Quest 12, because that would be a huge announcement. But if I had to say something that would be pretty cool to show up here, I think maybe something like Monster Hunter Rise 2, or I guess in theory Marvel Ultimate Alliance 4 could get announced here. And I was honestly thinking that, well, it wasn't honest, I wasn't like predicting it like as like a thing that will actually happen, but Marvel Ultimate Alliance 4 being announced could happen one day, because obviously they I think Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 sold well enough. I think it was over 1 million that they could greenlight another one and Nintendo would publish it, and I think that'd be pretty cool. So Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 4, or just a huge surprise I think closes this partner showcase. But yeah, that is all I have for today for you all. I hope you all enjoyed this predictions video. It isn't as long as my other predictions videos, but normally that's because obviously we have a third-party section in those videos and a first-party section. This time it was mainly third-party announcements, or predictions in once. I don't really have anything more that I could really talk about, at least for now. Maybe before the partner showcase begins tomorrow, like at the beginning of that video, maybe I will include a couple more predictions that I think of before it airs. But yeah, that is all I have for you all today. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all are excited for the partner showcase. I know I am. I'm honestly, obviously I think a lot of people were expecting a general, and I was too, but it's still really cool. It is a 25-minute Nintendo Direct, so there is a lot that they are planning to show off here. That is normally as long as the third-party sections are in these directs, if not a little bit, if not even, this is a little bit shorter than those sections normally. So there's a lot that they could talk about here. But yeah, again, I hope you all enjoy this video, and I will see you all tomorrow when the partner showcase airs. But until then, I hope you all do make you happy, because that rhymes with my previous name, Generic Happy, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Partner showcase time.